There's a green button up there. Okay,
We got.
thank you.
Thank you all for hearing us. In recent years, various interest groups, both on the political right and left, have called for the states to exercise their power under Article 5 of the Constitution to convene a constitutional convention to amend or indeed even replace the U.S. Constitution. Various groups have proposed a balanced budget amendment or repeal amendment, giving the states the power to veto federal legislation, a marriage amendment, defining marriage as a union of one man and one woman, a human life amendment, a term limits amendment, along with others to legalize marijuana, repeal the 16th Amendment, etc. Proponents of such conventions have ranged from George Soros on the left to various Tea Party groups on the right. Contrary to the claims of some proponents, the prospect of an Article 5 Convention of States is not a new idea which has been hidden away by the founders in the Constitution for such a time as this, only to be discovered by modern self-identified constitutional scholars. Noble as some of these amendments might be, those supporting an Article 5 Constitutional Convention are willfully oblivious to the can of worms that inevitably would be opened by giving today's instant gratification society the opportunity to scrap the careful and deliberate system bequeathed to us by the framers of the U.S. Constitution. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution provides, the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on application of the legislators of 2/3 of several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments which, in either case, shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress. This paper addresses two false premises and two false assurances made by proponents of the Article 5 Constitutional Convention. And might I say that this article that I'm reading from is written by Herbert W. Titus, who is a founding dean of Regent Law School and has taught constitutional law for 26 years. So if you're looking for someone who's adept at it and doesn't have a bone in the fight, this is someone who's neutral, unbiased. False premises. The problem of big government is found in the text of the U.S. Constitution, which can be corrected by changing the words of the document. The only remedy to the problem of an out-of-control federal government...
Justin, your time is up. You could wrap it up, please. The 2 minutes. So.
Okay. My last thing I want to talk about is learning from history what happened in 1787. The preceding Annapolis Convention of 1786 issued a call for the convention with delegates from all 13 states to devise changes to the then government Articles of Confederation, the first Constitution of the United States prior to the current Constitution. Those revisions or changes to the Articles of Confederation would need to be agreed to by Congress and then be afterwards confirmed by the legislators of every state, as required by the Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation. Early in 1787, Congress issued a resolution authorizing a convention with the same ratification requirement, and 9 of the 12 states that sent delegates to the Philadelphia Convention of 1787 also included the Article 13 ratification requirement. Instead of simply revising or amending the Articles of Confederation, the runaway 1787 convention replaced them with an entirely new constitution. In fact, Edmund Randolph, a delegate from Virginia, urged fellow delegates, there are great sessions when persons with limited power are justified in exceeding them, and a person would be contemptible not to risk it. And rather than adhering to Article 13 requirement that any alternations would have to be confirmed by the legislatures of every state, the newly drafted Constitution will be ratified in accordance to its own mode of ratification found in Article 7. On September 13, 1788, with only 11 of the 13 states having ratified the new Constitution, the Continental Congress passed a resolution declaring that it had been ratified. North Carolina and Rhode Island had not yet ratified and would not do so until nearly a year and a half later. On May 29th, in 1790, Rhode Island became the 13th and final state to ratify the Constitution. What was originally a limited convention for the sole and express purposes of revising the Articles of Confederation had transformed into a runaway convention, producing an entirely brand new Constitution with such clear precedent. Who is to say it will not happen again? Now, obviously, we agree that the U.S. Constitution is a very great document and one that should not be rewritten. I believe that the better way of reigning in big government, I think we all can agree that government has definitely exploded past its bounds that the framers of the Constitution originally intended. That is for Article 6, and that is nullification of the state. And I'm thankful that the state of South Carolina has nullified many unconstitutional bills in the House and Senate on the federal level. But it's our duty right now to do the same thing when it comes to these federal mask mandates, to unconstitutional spending. That's in your power to do such a thing.
Okay,
Any questions?
sorry, your time is up. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Lynn Teague?
Thank you very much, Lynn Teague, for the League of Women Voters, and anticipating that time would be short, I have written testimony, so I can keep myself short here. The League opposes this bill, both bills, but the League supports the call of a convention under Article 5 only under specific conditions that are not met in this resolution. And we do not agree with the interpretation of the Convention of States folks on the ability to very confidently structure this event. And we note that the Congressional Research Service also does not find definitive answers to how all of these ambiguities around process would be resolved. But knowing that many people would go to that, I want to talk a little bit about what would happen if they actually got what they wanted here. Holly Ulbrich, our past state president and retired professor of economics from Clemson University, wrote an op-ed last year, and there is a reference to it there if you want to read it, that just the economic implications of restricting the Commerce Clause in the way that has been suggested would be disastrous in many unanticipated ways. We also want to note that our national and state politics today are very unstable and divided. The process of defining and conducting a constitutional convention would fuel even more dangerous anger and division, and many in our nation would not be willing to accept the legitimacy of this process or its outcome. The lack of a national consensus on major issues is precisely why supporters are taking this route. Much that would be done would be very unpopular. It would be the equivalent, in fact, even just organizing a convention would be the equivalent of throwing a lit match into a pile of gas-soaked rags. The prospect of further dividing our nation, we believe, is probably the most serious danger of all and should not be underestimated. And as a 12th generation, very patriotic South Carolinian, let me say, South Carolina's made a big mistake in risk assessment in the past about how to deal with the federal government. And I would hate to see that happen again. We need to be very cautious in dealing with something as important, as fundamental as our Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Teague. Any questions? Senator from McCormick.
Ms. Teague, I've looked at your appendix 1. It talks about y'all are in favor of one, provided it be under strict guidelines. And you've got A, B, C, D, E, and F. And do you have any reason to believe that these issues would not be taken care of?
Yes, this resolution specifically is intended to have the states vote by state.
Okay.
And the League's position is very definitely that we would want population representation.
But that's not set forth in the Constitution. So are you asking for another amendment that would do that?
No, I'm saying that we don't believe it's clear in the Constitution which way it would go. And our preference, it isn't that we would support it, we would find it acceptable to have a convention. We would much prefer amendment by amendment process without a convention for any changes in the
Well, it'd be
Constitution.
good if Congress would just take care of these issues for us, ma'am, and then we wouldn't be here talking about it.
Well, these fundamental issues are not going to go away with a convention either. That was really one of my points here, that the fundamental differences and divisions in our country are very serious right now, and they don't go away with one mechanism or another.
Let me just go over these real quick. The Constitutional Convention must be transparent, not be conducted in secret. I understand the earlier one was, the doors were locked. So if it could be an open process, there's nothing that says it can't be an open process. Public has a right to know what is being debated and voted on. I agree. Representation at Constitutional Convention must be based on population rather than one state. I mean, that's not what Article 5 says. C, voting at the Constitutional Convention must be by delegate, not by state. Delegates from one state can have varying views and should be able to express them by individual votes. I don't think that's what's spelled out
Yeah,
here.
the league developed this actually before I was a member, but the usual process takes 2 years. And if it would require a constitutional amendment to change how that was done, then we would want that. We do not want a state-by-state vote process.
I understand, but the Constitution is clear on the subject. D, the Constitutional Convention must be limited to a specific topic. I like that idea. It's important to guard against runaway convention, which considers multiple issues or topics that were not initiated by the states. If the language is such that prohibits that, that would solve that. Only state regulations on a single topic count when determining if a constitutional convention should be called. Counting states request by topic ensures that there is sufficient interest in a particular subject to call a convention. I understand it to be that they have to make sure that whatever topics they're going to agree on, in order to get to the 34, that those have to be consistent. In other words, if they're going to have a balanced budget amendment and or a fiscal restraint, those 34 states would have to be consistent with that. They'd have to be consistent with some type of term limits analysis and also potential consistent with some type of control on regulations. But if those were spelled out in great detail and all the states agreed to those and those came to a point of unanimity with all of those, would that take care of that problem?
Well, actually, I think we would argue about whether wording that says, let's see here, specifically limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, that's an awfully broad single topic.
Well, I mean, the article, the amendment, Article 5 clearly shows that it intends for us to use it. It's provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1008 shall in any manner after the first and alter the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. So it clearly anticipated that this section that our founding fathers put in our Constitution would be used potentially. And so I'm looking at your list of things that the league wants us to do, but they appear to me on the face to be unconstitutional.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
yes, I appreciate your point, but we would again say that we do not see this as restricted to a single subject when we're talking about limiting the scope and authority of the federal government. That's everything from the Commerce Clause on. That's a huge, huge scope.
Well, you got the necessary and proper clause too, that buttresses the others. So, the Congress, the Constitution gives the Congress a lot of power, a necessary and proper clause as well, to further buttress the other provisions in the Constitution, the other specific rights granted to Congress. So we have to be careful, that we follow this strict constructionist. We have to follow it very closely. And where it doesn't, and it's ambiguous, if it is at all, then we have to look to precedent to see what it is we're supposed to do. But thank you for your help here today.
Well, thank you, Senator.
Okay, Evan Mulch.
Thank you, Senators. It's an honor to be here, and I've got some documents that I'm having passed around. I don't have time to explain them, but what it tells you is is that there is nobody from the 1787 convention that said they operated within the rules. So still to this day, we have nobody who came out of that convention who said the rules were obeyed. So it just goes to show that was a runaway convention. And so if you study those documents, you'll find that out. I have a simple solution to what's going on. I mean, this is arguments back and forth, and let's just have a debate, okay? South Carolina hold a debate between Mark Meckler and Robert Brown. Robert Brown would be on our side of against a call for an Article 5 convention. And Robert Brown has already offered $10,000 if he were to lose the debate to give to the Convention of States project. And, you know, Mark Meckler, a lawyer from California, you know, against a constitutionalist from Utah would be, you know, something you could actually do. In fact, I think the state of Montana invited Mark Meckler to debate Robert Brown, and Mark Meckler refused to show up, which we're not surprised about, because if you actually argue the logical points of this Article 5, it is a silly time period to call an Article 5 convention. Senator Garrett, I know you pointed to this lady who, you pointed out that the Congress isn't obeying what they're supposed to be obeying, but either are the states. And I can say this because I travel all around the state. I work on Constitution Solution workshops. We had one in Senator Rice's district not too long ago. I think you attended one class, the first class of 6 of them. And what we do is we teach, you know, people the Constitution. And the fact is most South Carolinians have no idea what the Constitution actually means. And, you know, if we're going to call an Article 5 convention and it actually works out the way Mark Meckler says it'll work out, how do we get our Congress to obey it? You know, Lindsey Graham called, he was here a few days ago wanting to call an Article 5 convention. And the fact is Lindsey Graham doesn't obey the Constitution. In fact, he's really bad at obeying the Constitution. And so he's basically asking for us to call a convention, I guess, so he'll obey it. Why should we have to take action for Lindsey Graham to take action on something he took an oath to? All of you took an oath to obey the U.S. Constitution, and the supremacy clause is in that U.S. Constitution, and that should be honored in the respectful way that the founders wanted you to honor that. And when the supremacy clause was put in there, the belief in it is that you have a duty to, whenever the federal government passes something that's unconstitutional, you have a duty to say no, or just to not even acknowledge what the federal government does. And so my advice for this group is to invite Robert Brown in for debate with Mark Meckler. I'm sure Mark Meckler won't show up because he knows he'll lose. In fact, he didn't reply to Robert Brown's invite for that. So that's something you can do to help get this, because we can all agree that more of this discussion needs to take place. A lot of these people are new that are here. They're learning about this, the other side for the first time. And so that's what my advice would be. And if you read the material I gave to you, you can see there's not one founding father of our Constitution that says we operated within the bounds of the Articles of Confederation when this convention happened, which meant it was a runaway convention. And Nebraska, by the way, they passed a call for an Article 5 convention, and they suspended the rules. And that's exactly what's going to happen. It'll be a clown show. I mean, if you want some entertainment value, call a convention. Because, man, put that on a reality TV show, and we will not know what's going to happen. But I would rather, since, you know, the future of my, you know, my family, my neighbors, you know, we want to live in a constitutional republic where there is liberty. I'm sure everybody up here agrees. I'm sure everybody in the audience agrees. Most of the people here are very nice people. They do want to save America. We all know our country is in trouble right now. But your duty as elected officials, you've taken that oath to the U.S. Constitution, is to obey it and help teach it. And Senator Rice, I wish you would have finished the Constitution workshop when it was held in your territory. But that's something that you need to help with, because, you know, you guys are only going to be here so much longer, and you're going to hope that children and grandchildren take the Constitution and obey it and carry on this great legacy we have of living in a free country. I'm past my 2 minutes. I'm sure nobody's holding their hand up, but maybe it's that good of a speech where you could have listened to me a little bit longer. But I'll just...
We've been mesmerized, but...
Hey! Do you got all night? I'll be here till midnight. You know? Okay.
All right.
You'll be here till midnight.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Okay, does anyone else want to be heard? We have one. Okay, come forward.
Sorry that I put my name on the list, but evidently.
What's your name?
McLean, John.
Okay, we found you on the last page.
Okay, that's fine. But anyway, I'm worried about the way this country's going. We still have state rights in the Constitution. It doesn't say federal government rights. They come down and tell you people what to do. So in a way, you're representing the federal government. You're not representing the state of South Carolina. I mean, all this stuff going in Washington, nobody listens to the Constitution. They don't even read the Constitution. I read it, and I'm confused by it sometimes. But my inalienable rights, sir, are being taken away. Not just my rights, but everybody in this room's rights. We still have inalienable rights in this Constitution. Where they at? Where they at? They disappeared. They eradicated. Nobody ever talks about our inalienable rights. And it's in the Constitution. If it was wrote 300 years ago, whatever. We only had 13 states back then. Now we got several more. Hawaii is the 50th state. That's why I had Hawaii 5-0 on. I am just concerned about the way this country's going. It seems like the public don't care. They are defeated before they can go to the State House, call a representative, whether he's in the state of South Carolina, Michigan, Texas. They're supposed to know the Constitution in Washington. They don't. Anything the federal government says, we just like a march to the penguins. A bunch of pelicans flap the wings at the same time. If you go down to the beach and watch them, they flap them at the same time. Even the geese do it. They flap the wings at the same time. And I'm an American. I fought in this country, and I got some benefits from the government. I'm not complaining about that, but it's our Constitution. And we act like we don't have any more rights in this country. And you know, y'all were elected by the people. So was the people that voted for the senators. But they don't listen to us. They don't return our phone calls. I mean, you can call them on a recording. And I was speaking to Mark earlier. Ted Cruz is supposed to be a constitutional lawyer, but he don't use it when he gets up there. They turn him down. They don't want to hear what he has to say. Very few people in the United States know the Constitution. And I wish you senators would read the Constitution every day. I know can't do it every day. We all have problems. But this country is founded on this stuff. It doesn't say federal government rights. It says state rights. And it's in the Constitution. And they get away with stuff day after day, year after year. Even the late President Ronald Reagan got up and said, the problem is that we have too much government interfering in people's business. You seen what happened in the last 40-something years after he left office? More and more and more government. They want to control the people. I'm not a robot. I'm not a light switch. I'm a human being just like you are up there. They don't want to control your lives, but I'm not a lobbyist. I know y'all listen to the lobbyists. They pay the money to vote for this bill, vote for that. All you got to do is say, no, don't talk to me. I'm let the people put me in here. I'm going to do what the people say, not what the lobbyists say. And that's the same thing goes up in Washington. All I hear about January the 6th. But
Your 2 minutes.
All right, I'm wrapping up now. That people forget that capital belongs to us. It don't belong to the elected few. It belongs to the American people, just like the State House belongs to us. And I could go on, but I want you to get home by 12 o'clock, okay? All right. Thank you so much.
Take a question.
If somebody wants to throw me out one, I'll throw it out. May not like what I
Okay,
say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, I heard you, and I think I know where you're coming from. You are in favor of what we're talking about up here?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
this is for the people. I mean, we don't know how it's going to turn out to be, but let's give it a try.
I heard you, but I just want to clarify that.
You know, it's like putting a puzzle together. You look at the picture, but you got to work on the puzzle to complete the puzzle. All right?
I just
Thank you
want
so
to-
much.
Senator from McCormick, you have a
Mr.
question?
Chairman, I just want to thank you for your service, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, is anyone else? Okay, we have one other. Yes, come step forward and state your name.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Kimberly Snyder. I live in Greer, South Carolina, and I'm testifying in favor of 3205 to call a convention of states. I represent my family, my community, my church, and thousands of South Carolinian Convention of States supporters who couldn't be here today in our collective stand to defend liberty to the next generation. As you are well aware at this point, supporters of this resolution are in favor of limiting terms on Congress, limiting federal debt, and limiting overreach of the federal government on the states. What you may not realize, however, is that supporters of this resolution are also supporters of you. The country we want for our children and grandchildren, where a convention of states can happen to rein in the federal government, is a country with more power at the state, local, and individual levels. We are here because we trust you far more than we trust the bureaucrats and lobbyists and people in DC to legislate how we live our daily lives. We have voted for you to protect our freedoms, and we bring this resolution to you today because it is the most impactful way to not only protect our freedoms, but those of the children coming after us. I am 24 years old, I am not married, and I don't have a family. However, I grew up in a country where I could openly worship God, be educated at home, and learn to think for myself from a young age. It's my dream one day to raise a family and to raise children in these same freedoms. That's why I took off work today, drove 2 hours each way from Greer to tell you this dream and to ask you to support me in it. I'm not here with a radical agenda to change America or change the Constitution, and if I thought that was even the remotest possibility, I wouldn't be here at all. I'm here to fight for freedom and its preservation, and I believe, as our state legislators, that you have that same passion. With that, I thank you for supporting H 3205 and joining all of us and the rest of South Carolina in today's fight for tomorrow's liberties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak? We have one more.
Hello, thank you for hearing me. My name is Van Mellon. I wasn't originally on the docket, so I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. I'm from Kershaw County. I am with the Libertarian Party of South Carolina. I was an elected delegate to our convention last November from Kershaw County, and I'm also a registered voter, obviously, where we unanimously passed support for a convention of states. And I originally wasn't planning on speaking here. I just wanted to show my support, but I did want to take an opportunity to kind of criticize some of the criticisms that I've heard today that seem to bear inherent contradictions. One of them is about a runaway convention. You know, what was it? The 1786 convention is being criticized for having been run away. But I would imagine that all of those critics, in voicing their support for the Constitution that resulted from that, are glad that it resulted the way that it did, I would imagine. And the fear of losing the Constitution that we have now in said convention, which my understanding is that's not really a reality if you think about the nuts and bolts of how it works. But again, the Article 5 Convention of States authority is contained within that very Constitution. So how can you be against a Convention of States and be for the Constitution? You can't have it both ways. We all know that Congress is representing their own interest. I mean, how many six-figure a year jobs turn you into a millionaire within a year or two of getting those jobs, right? And so we're left with the burden of what to do about that and how to reclaim the nation. This doesn't matter what your political philosophy is. As a libertarian, I identify as both a constitutional conservative and a neoliberal and a classical liberal. If you're familiar with political philosophy, you know that that's a very common thing for all Americans. We have a lot more in common that we agree upon than what the propaganda machine likes to paint the picture of. I'm for a convention of states. I trust you guys to appoint a delegate to represent the best interest of this state and not go on some crazy mission to, I mean, think about that. Think about that. If we get 34 or 38 states, each independent legislative bodies appointing their own delegates, do you really think that those delegates are going to conspire together to replace the entire U.S. Constitution? Is that a reality that you think is going to happen? I just think it's insane to believe so. While the wording might appear ambiguous to those who really don't have the mind for these things, I think every member of this committee does have the mind and the understanding of how that would work, and you could see how unrealistic that would be. That's all I want to say. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity, and thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay. I would like to just state briefly some of the views of some of the framers that I've researched that I think, in their view, this was an important arrow in the quiver of the states in the Federalist system, meaning that some power belongs with the federal government and some with the state government, and they keep the two in check. And I'm going to start with Hamilton in Federalist 85, in Federalist Papers, regarding Article 5. This is what Hamilton said. We may safely rely on the disposition of the state legislatures to erect barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. So in the eyes of Alexander Hamilton, this was put in the Constitution so that the legislature could push back against the federal government. The state legislatures could push back against the federal government. Samuel Jones, who was at New York, who was at the ratifying convention. The reason why there are two modes for amending the Constitution, and he's talking about Article 5 that permits an amendment to arise by operation of Congress or by the states. So those are the two modes he's talking about. The reason why there are two modes for amending the Constitution, I suppose, to be this. It could not be known to the framers if there was too much power given to it or too little. They therefore prescribed a mode by which Congress might secure more of it if it was found necessary, and they prescribed for the states a mode of restraining the federal government if upon trial and error and experience it may be found necessary. I'm not sure that there's more prescient words than that, because I do think it's been found necessary. Then I'm going to go to Madison in Federalist Paper 43. The Constitution equally enables the general, which he means the federal, the general and the state government to originate the amendments of errors as they may be pointed out by experience on one side or the other. Again, Madison is making the same case, that the framers put this in the Constitution, two ways to amend the Constitution. In classic framer, you see their classic philosophy or guiding principle come through. we don't want to concentrate political power. We want to diffuse it. We're going to give the federal government an ability to amend the Constitution. We're going to give the states an ability to amend the Constitution. And over time and with experience, we may realize that we gave too much power to the one and not enough to the other. Or the courts, what's really happened is the courts have ascribed more power through their decisions and to the federal government and stripped it from the states. And so that's, I mean, so that's a very important aspect of federalism in the minds of the framers, as best as I can tell. I mean, and so these are, you know, James Madison, referred to as the father of the Constitution, and probably more than anyone contributed to its provisions. He certainly kept the most detailed record of the Constitutional Convention. But just wanted to make those points because at the end of the day, again, I began being opposed to this, and I studied myself to a point where I agreed with it. And it's really these final historical statements that I've read are what crystallized in my mind why the framers put it in there as a tool for the states to use to push back against the federal government and to ask the states to unilaterally disarm, essentially, and never use it, is really surrendering the field. And so that's kind of where now I know it's only should be used in desperate times, but I think we have pretty desperate times. It's not a first choice, it's but that's where I come down, and at the end of the day, I do have faith in what Madison and Hamilton and many others believed how important this was to maintain the balance of power between the state and the federal government. And that's why I think it is a legitimate thing to use at the appropriate time. So do any other committee members have any statements they'd like to make?
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
yeah, I want to, I guess, qualify what I'm thinking and make sure that I'm right. When we hit 34 states, I'm trying to make it simplified, but when we hit 34 states on an issue, and then let's forget right now what the issue, but a single issue or a group of issues, whatever we hit, the federal government can call, or is by the Constitution should call, or assign a time and a place for that convention to be called. Beyond that, I don't think that the federal government, the way I read Article 5, plays a role in it. Beyond that, the states themselves pick their delegates, set the rules for the delegates to go, and let them debate the issue. The way I see it, and we've heard some discussion on this, but it's one state, one vote. Senator McCormick got into that just a minute ago. But you could have, it doesn't matter whether you've got 100 delegates coming from South Carolina. You know, ideally you don't want one because you want a group of people that can discuss the issues, but they vote as one. In other words, if you had 9 delegates there and it was a 5-4 vote, then the vote, the prevailing vote would be the 5, whatever that answer is on that. And obviously it's going to be, if we're talking about balancing a budget or we're talking about term limits, I mean, there's going to be some discussion on that. But then on the ratification part of that, the way and I want y'all to correct me if I'm wrong, but it talks about ratification, and the ratification can be done one of 2 methods, and I believe it's up to the states individually as how you ratify. South Carolina could ratify one way, and North Carolina could ratify another way. Now, y'all may tell me that I'm wrong on that, but we could literally put it on a ballot in South Carolina and allow the people to vote. And however that popular vote comes out would be, we'd either ratify or not, or we could put it in both houses and sign it by the governor, and it would ratify that way. But that's, I think it's important that the way I look at this, and I'm not an attorney, I'm a ditch digger by trade. Y'all are the attorneys. And so that's why I'm looking to you to answer this, but it sounds like to me, other than calling for a time and date, the federal government really doesn't have a role in this until we get something passed and we get it ratified.
Well, the mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress. Article 5 does provide for that, the mode of ratification.
Okay.
So whether you have a convention or in the state or what, so that mode, so that is left up to them. But I will say this too, again, going to Federalist 85, Hamilton, where he said, we may safely rely on the disposition of the state legislatures to erect barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. And he further said in that Federalist 85, the words of this article are preemptory against Congress. Nothing in particular is left to the discretion of that body. I mean, what he's saying is very little. I mean, there is some discretion, but not much discretion left. And that's the view of the framers. And now, you know, it'll be up to whether ultimately, perhaps the judiciary ends up the Supreme Court ends up acknowledging that or not. But I do believe if you look at the framers and their view, then that it was very little discretion with Congress, because this was the state's way to propose an amendment as opposed to the federal government's way to propose amendments, which was also provided for in Article 5. Any other?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator from Orangeburg.
Mr. Chairman, it appears though, I've been doing some research, and look like every couple of decades we go through this act of calling for a convention and then withdrawing those efforts later. And I'm just going to read a statement, and I'm going to relax for the rest of the hearing. In the late 1970s and 1980s, many states adopted resolution calling for constitutional conventions to require the federal government to balance the budget every year. From the mid-80s through 2010, no such new resolution passed, and about half of the states that had adopted those resolutions rescinded them, in part due to fears that a convention, once called, could propose altering the Constitution in a way that the state resolution did not envision. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator from McCormick.
First, I want to thank all of you folks. This is a very important issue, and we needed to hear from all of you to try to make a decision. Similar to the senator from Charleston, I had always opposed, not as a politician, just as actually I was a city judge from time to time, and I did study my Constitution, and I studied the Constitution beside my Bible. I kind of believe in both of them, almost like they're holy, and they're both holy in one sense, because Jesus said, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's." So I put those two together when I'm trying to think through these processes. And I've come to the conclusion that we're $30 trillion in debt, or almost. And this young lady over there and that young girl that came in here and spoke earlier, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. But, you know, we have spent all the way down to our great-grandchildren. I think someone told me that the debt right now for everybody is in the $400,000 range. So as we look at each other, look at your neighbor, in order to get us caught up, it costs $400,000 or more. So we've spent that money. Our federal government has spent that money. You know, I'm not really happy sometimes about the state accepting the money from the federal government. And Nikki Haley stood up and didn't accept some of that money, and I applauded that. But we need to make sure all of us do that, or we got to cut it back somehow. None of you in your own budgets, none of you, can spend more than you take in, or you won't last long. And I'm afraid our federal government has gone beyond anything than it was ever even anticipated. Actually, a balanced budget amendment couldn't pass right now because of the economics. Think about it. How would we balance our budget if our deficit is 120% of our gross national product? Then how could we possibly balance the budget? You can't. So fiscal restraint is the idea, and over a period of years, in order that we don't destroy our economy and American economy. But this is a protection by the states. It's a power given to the states, and it's in our Constitution. And it's almost gospel in my mind that we have a provision in the Constitution that helps us when our federal government is completely out of control. I don't know how to fix it, but our founding fathers, in their infinite wisdom, they gave us this document. It's there, and I read it, sir. I do read it, and I read it often. And I try to think through, what did they mean? Well, they didn't put it in here for the heck of it. I'm sure of that, okay? Now, my biggest concern is that we need to make sure whatever this legislature does, in joining with all these other legislatures, is we have language that prohibits what these folks are rightly considered or concerned about is a runaway convention. And I'm okay with that. And I think that's the way we approach it, and make sure absolutely positive that it could not go off track. Now, I know some of you don't believe that's a possibility. You don't think it's even possible, and why should we do that in these bad times? I don't know how much worse we can get than $30 trillion. I mean, again, I'm not going to take questions right now. I'm just going to say what I need to say.
Clear, we don't take any questions, okay?
Right.
Okay, so.
But I just wanted to point that out. So, having said that, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to do some more work on this. I've talked to Senator Rice about this as it relates to what language we use to be able to make sure that and we can do that at the full committee stage. But I want to make sure that whatever we do locks it down to where this thing could not get out of hand. And if it does, I'm not going to vote for it. Okay, but I want it to get out of, I want it here to get to the full committee, so the full committee can put their eyes on it and their thoughts on it, and hopefully we can come up with something that's sound.
Well, thank you. Any other, Senator?
I just want to clarify where we are right now, because we've got several bills, and we have actually passed out of this committee 2 bills. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, 2 bills were passed out of subcommittee to go to the full committee. Those bills were S-133 and S-141.
So they're at the full committee level, correct, right now?
Those have been reassigned to this reconfigured subcommittee.
So they're in our possession.
Do we need to vote
No,
141 out?
No, what I would like to do is I would like to take the House Bill 3205 and I have an amendment prepared to amend it to basically what the Convention of States language is, because that's what most other states who have passed a Convention of States resolution have adopted, so that we have the same language. So that's what this amendment would do. It would take 3205 as a strike-all amendment that would insert into it.
Can we all be reading from the same page? I don't have.
Yeah. Well, do you have a copy of the amendment? Yeah. And we would do that to 3205, and we'd also do it to the Senate bill
133.
133, so that we have 2 vehicles. We have a House bill and a Senate bill as a vehicle. So I would propose an amendment to do to those 2 bills, and hopefully the House would concur, and if they don't, then we would go to conference.
Mr. Chairman.
Or they could, they could amend it one more time. The House could actually.
Mr. Chairman, this would be like the other 17, exactly like the language in the other 17 states that have approved the Convention of States. This language.
Ms. Benson, you did that research.
Mr. Chairman, and I'll also look back at my co-counsel, Madison Falk, there are variations in the applications that have been sent forward to Congress. This language appears to be what is found in most of them, because this is the language that is listed as a model language on the Convention of States website.
Are you referencing the application?
Yes.
Okay, we can
And
do it.
If you
Which one?
If you look in your folder, there's a Convention of States which says Article 1, U.S. Constitution, and lists the type of bills that are currently pending before this subcommittee. S-133 and H-3205 are the bills that were based upon the Convention of States model bill, and according to what we have found, 17 states have passed an application that is substantially similar to that model. And as to the balanced budget amendment, which is S-141, 29 states have passed something substantially similar to the balanced budget. As to the congressional term limits applications, which are S-363 and H-3663, 4 states have passed those, although the 17 that have passed the Convention of States has mention of term limits, congressional term limits in it. We don't know how Congress interprets that as to how that they count each of those applications. Those are the applications that are currently pending and that this subcommittee has.
Okay, so we have before us a motion to, I move to offer this amendment to H 3205 as discussed. We have a second. Okay, any discussion? Being no discussion, we'll move immediately to a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, the ayes have it. And I'm sorry. And Ms. McLeod, how do you vote?
No.
No, okay. So now a motion,
And also for 133, S-133.
yes, and the same, and so I would move that S-133 be amended with the same amendment so that we have 2 vehicles, a House and a Senate vehicle, with the exact same language on it. And we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. We move immediately to a vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay?
No.
Okay, the ayes have it.
Nay.
Thank you. And then I would offer an amendment to S 887. This is the Senator from Pickens bill dealing with delegates and creates a criminal penalty for an unfaithful delegate who does not comply and vote in a manner that is consistent with the application from the state. And
Mr. Chairman, this amendment would add just one sentence that says, when Congress calls an Article 5 convention, the General Assembly shall determine the method of selecting candidates for commissioners or alternatives to the Article 5 convention.
right. And so mainly what this is doing is keeping the senator from Pickens's unfaithful delegate legislation that can't be in the same joint resolution. It must be a bill, not a joint resolution. So we're doing it separately. It keeps his language in place, but it does make it clear that we are not going to select a method of choosing candidates for a convention at this time, because in my view, I have a very strong opinion that the best time to do that is if and when a convention is called, because we will have further, it may be next year and it may be 20 years and maybe never, but it's better to make that decision of how you're selecting them, let the General Assembly make that decision at that point in time. So that's the reason why I'm proposing this. And so we have a second. Do we have any discussion? Okay, there being no discussion, we'll move immediately to a vote on the adoption of the amendment. All in favor indicate by saying aye. 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 Those opposed? Ms. McClatchy?
Nay.
Senator? Okay, nay. Okay, the ayes have it. All right.
Chairman, you'd like these reported out at the next meeting of the full Judiciary Committee?
Yes, these will be reported out on the next full committee meeting, which is next week, I think. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, I believe one is planned.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And did we pass the bill as amended? Did I do that motion?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right,
Yes, sir.
good.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, 141 was previously reported out. That is the balanced budget amendment that was previously reported out by the subcommittee without an amendment. Did you want it also to be reported out?
Yeah, we have a motion to report 141 out.
Second.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, neither of the, S-133 and S-141 were not listed as being on the agenda. They had previously been in subcommittee and had been acted upon by the subcommittee. They are within the jurisdiction of this subcommittee because they were reassigned to this subcommittee.
You've already had testimony on those, is that right?
we passed it out
Yes, sir.
last year?
That last year. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, in April of last year.
Yeah, and 141 has already been passed out, actually,
Yes, sir. Both of them.
last year.
In
And
April of last year. Mhm.
That means not necessarily we need to take any action on those two, right?
I think we're just reaffirming that we're sending them back out. Since they were sent back, I don't.
Yes, sir. They were reassigned to this subcommittee.
Okay,
Well,
well,
motion that we report out 141.
okay, we have a motion to report 141. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, is any discussion? Being no discussion, we'll move immediately to a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Senator from Richland, nay. So vote of 3 to 2, the ayes have it.
133.
Yes, sir. Well, that's the Senate version of H 3205. Which is what, I can't remember. Which is the Convention of States. And I thought you wanted both a Senate and a House version reported.
No, but we amended
Right,
that.
right,
We amended this to the,
to match.
oh,
Yes, sir. Both of these will match.
okay.
Yes, sir. So you'll have a Senate and a House version that will match and have the Convention of States language in it, the model language.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So did we cover 133, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. That's
We
the
already
one.
just did
passed
that?
133.
Previously, okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, no other issues before the subcommittee. We will stand adjourned. Thank all of you for your participation.